I'm never quite sure what you call non-Indians. Do you call them white people? You don't call them Europeans. You can't call them Canadians as such in this reference, because Indians are also Canadians. But I'll tell you this, the non-Indian is going to have a severe culture shock when he realizes what the new Constitution, the Shaughnessy Golf Course decision, and Aboriginal rights may do to support Indian claims. You saw that map we ran this morning where the Gitxsan carrier tribal Indians want a mere 21,000 miles of British Columbia. 21,000 miles, an area in the Upper Nass, the Bulkley Valley, and the Upper Skeena, larger than Vancouver Island. Now let's get down to cases this morning and find out who's whistling Dixie. I've got with me Neil Sterritt Jr., the president of the Gitxsan Carrier Tribal Council. Give me the proper name of your tribal council.
The Gitxsan Wet'suwet'en Tribal Council, but it's also known as the Gitxsan Carrier.
We'll call it the Gitxsan Carrier for easy reference, right?
Okay, good.
And he is the president of the tribal council, and Louise Mandell, who is lawyer for the particular claims by the Gitxsan Carrier Tribal Council, correct?
That's correct.
How solid is your claim?
Well, the claim is very solid, and it's been strengthened by a recent Supreme Court of Canada decision in the Shaughnessy case, where for the first time the Supreme Court of Canada has clearly come out with the notion that Aboriginal title is a legal title. It's based upon Indians' interest in the land. It's a pre-existing right. It doesn't depend upon the government recognizing it, and that it applies to both reserve lands and non-reserve lands.
Every piece of land traditionally used by Indians of British Columbia, every reserve delineated by what we call the Old Colonial Council would now, if you're correct, get official title, taking it away from the present owners.
Well, it's not, the title doesn't necessarily take away from the present owners, but what the court says is that where the Indian nations have traditionally occupied their lands, they've never surrendered their lands to the Crown, that land remains burdened with Aboriginal title.
Well, I won't say except by effective use or effective conquest. That's an antiquated argument which won't hold water, eh?
Well, the question about effective use and conquest, I think, is going to be a political question as much as a legal question.
Now we'll come to Neil Sterritt. What do you want? What are you going to do with it? And what are you going to do to us if you win?
Well, Jack, the Gitxsan Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs want recognition of their title and their jurisdiction over the 21,000 square miles.
You want a lot.
Let's
not whistle Dixie. You're saying they want recognition of title and they want jurisdiction.
That's right.
You want a separate Gitxsan republic within British Columbia.
Jack, what we're saying is that there is room for another level of government in Canada, and that the model, the principle, will be established by a land claim like ours, through the territory of ours, that if that principle is established, it will apply to all people in that territory, but it's established first by us.
I'm not going to let you away with that. You've got a boundary marker in your traditional tribal lands of 21,000 square miles.
That's right.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
You want legal total jurisdiction, administration, and control of that 21,000 square miles.
Jack, in 1915...
Why don't you answer my question?
I'm going to answer it. In 1915, our hereditary chiefs said, we want the opportunity to define our relationship with the rest of Canada. By having recognition of title and jurisdiction, we can then start to define our relationship. We're not saying that it will be another country within Canada, but we have to define our place in Canada, and that's what we will do through this process.
Now, let's carry that a step further. Hazelton's a town in the Gitxsan Carrier area.
That's right.
Burns Lake is a town in the Gitxsan Carrier area.
That's right.
If you win all the way, these towns would belong to you.
They will be within our territory. The question of jurisdiction, I've talked about jurisdiction, the question of jurisdiction will be the definition of what jurisdiction the province will have within our territory. That's what we're coming to. And the jurisdiction, through a successful case, will establish that.
All right. I don't know what jurisdiction means. Can you tell me what jurisdiction means?
Jurisdiction means who controls it.
You want, but the tribal council wants total control legally.
Well, legally, what the Tribal Council can rest upon is that the Supreme Court of Canada has recognized Aboriginal title for them. Now, how that is then described, and also the Supreme Court of Canada rests upon the fact that title, Aboriginal title, is based upon the fact that there's sovereignty in the Indian nations, and there's a relationship between the Crown and the Indian nations. Now, how that relationship is going to define itself into the future is a matter for negotiations.
All right, I'll accept that definition, and I'll accept your woolly definition of jurisdiction, right? It is woolly, isn't it?
Well, we're talking as two sovereigns. We're talking one-to-one, and the Crown of Canada and our people. And we're talking about title and jurisdiction.
Right.
That's what they're talking about.
What concessions are you prepared to make to those non-Indians established industrially or socially or residentially in your land?
Well, we've already said that our territory, the claim that we have filed, does not affect the people who now own land within our territory.
So it wouldn't affect Burns Lake?
No.
It wouldn't affect Hazelton?
No. It would not
It wouldn't affect Alcan?
That's different. See, Alcan is not within our territory. Alcan intends to come in under the license they had in 19...
but there's a command and completion project
right.
within your territory,
Right.
which has presently been halted for economic reasons, I think.
That's
Delayed.
right. That's right. Well, it's a smart move on their part, because with this claim there, the title that the province says they had is at question, and the smart money would stay away until this issue is resolved.
Indians hold back industrial development and deprive non-Indians and Indians jobs in BC by the legal action for tribal land rights.
No way,
right?
Jack. No way. What we're saying is that the existing development that is going on will not be affected, but any future development will be held back until this issue is resolved.
Jurisdiction, therefore, would give the Gitxsan Tribal
Council.
Wet'suwet'en Tribal Council would give them total economic jurisdiction of all developments in that 21,000 square miles.
Well, I think that, again, that's a political question, but certainly title, Aboriginal title, carries with it the right to the resources and the use of the resources.
Well, that's been established in smaller claims, has it not?
It has, and so there is definitely something to work out between the Gitxsan Nation and the province of British Columbia and the federal government as to how those resources are going to be shared and used.
The average tolerant non-Indian or white man would say, okay, on your reserves, mine your land, sell your timber, but don't try and take over the whole country, because we won't stand for it, even if the politicians or the Supreme Court of Canada gives it to you.
But Jack, what we're saying is that we have a right to be responsible for the resources in our territory.
But what about the rights of the other 2 million people who depend on the development of the land for all of the people?
Jack, a dome was built in Vancouver for $17 million. We couldn't raise $20,000 in our territory to keep an ice arena going when everyone was unemployed in the area.
$127 million it was for the dome.
Okay,
and you couldn't raise $20,000.
That was the deficit to keep that going. There should be a base, an economic base in our area for us to do some of those things for our people, and for the non-Indian people as well. They suffer just as much as we do when that situation develops. And for example, the logs that come out of our area that our people may be involved in logging, we get jobs, but if those same logs go to Prince Rupert and are processed through the pulp mill, the city of Prince Rupert gets a tax base. We don't. We have a right to be responsible for our resources. We have a right to be responsible for our education. We have a right to benefit from those resources in that area, and the excess that may exist can go to other levels of government within Canada.
Well, obviously, I'm not going to argue that the Indians' economic base is equal to the non-Indians' economic base. There's a great injustice there. But I'm just trying to keep the basic principles involved here. With Neil Sterritt, Jr., do you use the Jr.?
Yes.
Of the Gitxsan Tribal Council, and Louise Mandell, the council's legal advisor. After the break. A lot of non-Indians are still pretty mad about giving back the cut-off lands in West Vancouver, and they're always amazed by the awards up north. I remember one where the lawyer got $5 million. He cut the bill down later on.
Fort Nelson.
In Fort Nelson. Now, where does the Shaughnessy Golf... I understand the Shaughnessy Golf Course decision, which was one that said officials of the Indian Department didn't properly represent the Musqueam Indians, and they deserve... on this kind of, not fraudulent, but this inequitable lease, and therefore they got to be given $10 million, or what's that effect, and the right to renegotiate proper rents. How the devil does the Supreme Court of Canada drag in total Aboriginal rights from the Shaughnessy case, which you're obviously waving and saying, this is ours, this is going to win the case for us?
Well, actually, there was, I think the government went too far in the Shaughnessy case. What they did was say, look, the reason there's no trust here is because the Indians don't own their land. We own it. It's our land, Crown land, and the Indian just has an interest in it. And of course, that provoked the Gitxsan, Wet'suwet'en, and the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs and the Assembly of First Nations to intervene on the case and say that isn't the nature of Indian reserve land. It isn't your land, it's Indian land, and Indian people have had it since time immemorial. It's their ancestral territory. And what the Indian Acts do, what the Royal Proclamation does, is simply recognize their right. And it was on the basis of this intervention that the courts put their mind to what is the nature of Aboriginal title. And for the first time in Canadian legal history, they clarified the Calder case and said...
Calder, that was Nishka.
That's the Nishka case. They said there is an existing legal, not moral, Aboriginal title in the province of British Columbia. And Bill Bennett can no longer look the Indian nations in the eye and say there is no such thing as Aboriginal title. There's a Supreme Court of Canada decision which says that there is at this point.
You're telling me that the Shaughnessy case from the Supreme Court of Canada says that land is Indian Aboriginal land to which they have title?
That's right. They say about the Shaughnessy land, they said it's part of their ancestral territory, and the reserve recognized their Aboriginal title to that land.
There'll be a lot of people saying we need a new Supreme Court of Canada, but that's beside the point.
Well, they were applying 100 years of jurisprudence, and they were applying 300, 400 years of history to that proposition.
I'd forgotten the new Trudeau Constitution, but did the Trudeau Constitution give any effective Aboriginal rights? I thought he merely patted the women and the Indians on the head and said they're there now, existing rights.
Well, the existing rights which he spoke about in the Constitution are entrenched, which means they can only be taken away by a constitutional amendment. Now, the Supreme Court has said that Aboriginal rights, Aboriginal title, are legal and existing and will therefore be part of the Constitution.
You said the magic word, Premier Bennett. The Nishkas got a part decision from the Supreme Court of Canada.
That's right.
They've never had a nickel from the BC government.
No, they haven't, and the BC government refuses to enter into negotiations.
Are you suggesting, or do you believe that because of this new development in your claim, the BC government will now negotiate with you?
Well, Premier Bennett is asleep, and he's got to wake up.
Well, he's asleep on everything.
Well,
he's not really asleep on this. He's hiding in Palm Springs or down a hole with the earth pulled over the top of him at the moment, as far as we know.
But they're going to have to wake up, and this, the Musqueam case is going to help to wake them up. Our case is going to do it, and we're now it's a new ball game.
All right, now what is your action at the moment? Is it to prevent any dealing in the title and land? What is it, lis pendens or something?
We have a lis pendens, Jack, which simply prevents future development while this claim is in court.
Has that been accepted, that lis pendens?
Well, what we've done is we've filed, and we intend to take the claim, register it any time now, and at that point the province has 21 days to respond and to the claim. At that point, it becomes official. We now have it filed. It's not registered.
So that's merely a simple technical thing to do, is that correct?
That's all.
Therefore, as far as those people living in the 21,000 square miles is concerned, therefore, you're making no claims to the title of my summer cottage.
That's right.
You're making no claims to my industrial plant.
That if you already have a plan in place, but if you are thinking of doing one, you'll have problems.
In other words, this will freeze all development, not that there's any going on just now anyway in your 21,000.
Well, there's some logging going on, and it's not stopping the logging, but if say, BC Timber or Webster wanted to get a new tree farm license, we would stop that.
Even to create jobs, you would stop it?
Well, the jobs that are in place now, the existing tree farm licenses will last 20 years. So we're not halting the what economics there is, which is very little. But we are saying that the major companies that may have proposals in our territory are going to have to sit back. They can't state claims.
No more mining claims?
Not while the lis pendens is on.
And that will be automatic, will it?
That's right. That's what the purpose of
Any
the
chance
case
your
is.
application for a lis pendens or whatever it is, the filing can be refused?
Well, Legally, the only way that a lease pendants or an injunction could be refused is by order of court. So there'd have to be a hearing on it, and there'd have to be something positively stated to persuade a court to the contrary.
Now, just back to this jurisdiction thing, on which you're pretty woolly, if you don't mind me saying so. When it comes to you get your list pendants, and if you get title, which you may well do, you know, the country's full of small L liberals trying to help everybody else. Nobody cares about the unemployed non-Indian anymore. You've got to be female or strange or something before anybody will pay any attention to you. Does it mean that you would set up municipal government of your own, or would you just buy it from the provincial government? Would you buy hydro? Would you set up your own power stations? Would you buy education, or would you just cop out and pay for your own education, with grants, of course?
We would be setting up levels of government within that territory. We would have, for example, at the reserve level, that's a village, there would probably be some form of a government there. There would also be what we would call a territorial government. And we're talking about being responsible for the resources of that area. We're talking about all people in that area at some point as well, Jack.
You're not going to represent the non-Indians in this territory, are you?
No, the non-Indians will represent themselves at some point.
In their own legislature or in your territorial
in our
government?
territory. That's what I'm telling you,
In your
Jack.
territorial government?
That's right. I'm telling you that there is room for another level of government.
Another level?
Victoria isn't doing anything. Ottawa isn't doing anything.
That's only because they're there at the moment. I mean,
that's right.
We could have a government in Victoria that does something.
But the people who are affected by development should be involved in it. There's no question. And
I can't get away from the fact that you're setting up a republic in the centre of British Columbia.
It's another level of government. We have to negotiate with Victoria and British Columbia and Canada, and we intend to proceed on that line.
I've done my best. Anyway, it looks like you've got a valid claim and you're going to cause all kinds of trouble.
Looks like it.
Well, we're not going to cause any trouble, but we've got a valid claim.
Legal trouble.
Oh, yes, yes.
But you're going to be very kind to non-Indian for the moment. But don't build another smokestack on your factory.
We wouldn't.
No, you're telling the white man, don't build another
That's right.
Questions to Neil Sterritt, President of the Gitxsan Carrier Tribal Council, and to Louise Mandell, the lawyer. Call now, please, after the break. You know, this might be one of the most important programs I've ever done in terms of letting people know what's liable to happen in the province of British Columbia. Here's a call from Dawson Creek. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I saw the settlement on the Fort Nelson issue and now that Masqui issue. So, let's talk total honesty here. Let's see what this lawyer stands to gain when the government comes through with a cash settlement offer that they're not mentioning and stuff like that. Come on, let's be honest. You guys will go for bucks more than you'll go for land.
That's an attack on you.
I'll tell you, I think I'd like to answer that one, Jack. We have a number of lawyers who have worked for us for many years, and Louise being one of them. We call them our bingo specials because we hold bingos to get enough money to pay them. They're not getting rich on the Gitxsan Wet'suwet'en Tribal Council.
But whether they will, if you get a massive, will you sell for cash?
No, we will not sell for cash.
You see, she's talking about that, the NDP who got $5 million in legal fees, and then he very fairly negotiated them down to a much lesser fee, as I recall. Anything else you want, or is that it?
No, that's okay.
Okay. Go ahead from Prince George.
Yes, good morning. Jack, what's your guest going to do with the thousands of sports fishermen in his area in the future? Is he going to try to stop that? And I'll hang up and listen.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. We're very concerned about the fish. We're concerned about the way the commercial fishery is handled on the coast, because the steelhead that you might be fishing and the spring salmon are taken up through the coastal fishery. What we envision is changing the structure of the fishery, and federal fishery sees this as well, so that there is less of a commercial fishery on a coast and more of a fishery inland where you can select your stocks and protect the stocks.
You know, of course, people will be cynical about that answer because of the widespread belief that Indians with unrestricted rights bootleg much of their fish as far east as Calgary for the restaurants.
Jack, there's two sides to that story, and the other side is that our people, there's high unemployment. I don't want to get into that angle, but what I'm telling you is that we have the right to sell fish, and we're not able to because of federal laws.
Anything else? No, he's gone. Go ahead, please.
Yes. My question is about the women, the Indian women that were put off the reserves, and how they're going to settle with the dependents of these people, as well as people that are no longer dependent on their Indian mothers who were put off the reserves.
Yeah, that's also a good question. What our tribal council and our hereditary chiefs have established as a principle is that all people who descend from our villages as a Gitxsan or a Wet'suwet'en are members of our tribal group, and therefore wherever they live, whether it's in Kentucky or in Montreal or Vancouver, they are entitled to be part of this land claim.
Only if they come back.
No, there are many needs for our people, Jack, and you know that as well as anyone in the Lower Mainland, that we also have a responsibility to those who come to the city and find that it's a fairly hostile environment.
You mind that your newfound wealth and development might save the non-Indian money for welfare and government administration and looking after the tragedies which often happen to Indian youngsters?
Well, we think that if we can proceed with the kind of restructuring that goes on, that we can eliminate welfare, that we can be depending on our resources for our people and other people within our territory, and that we can do something about turning around the economic and social conditions that we find ourselves in, and that the rest of society is beginning to find themselves in.
Would the likes of your tribal council have a political philosophy? In other words, I'm thinking, here you're talking about restructuring this, restructuring that. You've got to have a government. That government's got to have a flavor. What flavor would it be?
Jack, I have never sat down to talk about whether I've got a political philosophy. I just think there are problems and I work on them.
Do you belong to a political party in BC?
No, I don't.
Didn't have to answer that question, right? Go ahead, please.
Morning. I just want to say I think there's a lot of respect for the law when it comes to serving the non-whites' interests, but when it comes to serving the Indian interests, there seems to be a big taboo about whether the law should be upheld. I think this is an example where hopefully the Indians will get a chance for self-determination.
Self-determination, is that the word?
That's a good word.
I don't like it at all. Why is that?
Well, Canada has signed covenants internationally respecting the rights of peoples to self-determination. All it means is that people choose what pathway they go into for the future. It's basically part of the doctrine of Aboriginal title, which says that the land is inalienable except with the consent of the people.
Yeah, but self-determination to me means splitting up the country.
No, no.
No,
there's many concepts of self-determination where nations within nations each pursue a separate course of political action.
Leave that for my children to worry about, because this won't be solved for 50 years, will it?
I hope in my lifetime.
It's going to take time.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. All we need is another level of government. We are now, at present, the most over-governed country in the world. Why should we have a privileged class now? As far as I'm concerned, a Native Indian is a Canadian, period, end of that. And we spend about $1,700,000,000 in the Indian affairs. Why don't we just give them the money and cut it off completely and they just become Canadian?
I'm sorry, but money isn't the issue. Money has been used in economic development and in welfare and many other forms. It's not solving our problems. It's not solving society's problems. We say another level of government. The existing levels of government, I think if anyone who has been in a resource development area, they are not responsible to the resources or to the people of the area, and ultimately in the long run to the people of Canada in the future. We are talking about a responsibility at another level, and I don't have any difficulty with that. I think that the other thing you're saying is that it's strictly Indian government. Yes, we're establishing the principle, but we're establishing a principle for government for all people in our territory in the future.
That's self-determination. That's a separate territory within British Columbia. If you keep selling that, you'll get into complete hostility.
No, Jack, I didn't say a completely separate territory. I have said that there is room for another level of government. We'll define our relationship with Canada.
So we then have two levels of government. We'd have the white man's government, we'd have the Indian government.
What I've just told you is that I'm talking about, all the people who live in our territory have concerns. There are people who are concerned about the logging and the lack of reforestation. There are people concerned about how fish are handled. And those are non-Indian people as well as Indian people.
You could do it better than we do.
Well, I think I'm not saying better than we. I say at a local level, people do have a basic responsibility for their future and for the resources.
Maybe what we need is self-determination for the Lower Mainland.
Well, I think that may be true.
More with Louise Mandell and Neil Sterritt Jr. after the break. Go ahead from Port McNeill to Neil Sterritt to the Gitxsan Carriers and lawyer Louise Mandell.
Pardon?
Go ahead. That's you.
Oh, that's me. Okay, Jack. What I would like to talk about.
Turn down the television set and I'll come back to you. Go ahead, please.
Jack.
Yes.
Yeah. This question is not just directed at you two guests that you have here this morning. It's directed at all the Indians. As far as I'm concerned, I think they're going a little bit overboard here. Another government? Boy, that's all we need in this country, especially in BC. And it seems to me that everything that the Indians ask for, they get. What the heck have they done around here to deserve all this? I'm sick and tired of this garbage. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. He's sick and tired of the garbage. What the hell have you done to deserve all this?
Well, I'd like to comment on another government, Jack. You know, people don't know that there is an Indian government that exists now and has continued to exist since before Europeans came here. That goes on. That's one of the reasons that our court case is so strong, is that we can demonstrate that an Indian government exists today.
You mean tribal councils?
Not tribal council. Hereditary chiefs. Through what you might know as a feast hall or a potlatch, we have a level of government, and it's...
But it's not a tax-raising level of government.
Well, it is. It is. That's one of the strengths of it. If we can demonstrate collective property rights, we can demonstrate taxation of our own people. It costs a hereditary chief a tremendous amount of money to perpetuate his name and his territory, and that goes on right now.
What about the nasty remarks they made? What the hell have you done to deserve the land?
Well, what have we, you know, I mean, I'm not placing blame anywhere, but what have we done to deserve the laws that have been put into place to prevent our people from continuing their tradition since 1858.
There was no vote for the Indian when I came here. I remember being in Smithers in 1949 election with Gordon Wismar, and I don't think, was there a vote? They certainly weren't allowed in the liquor stores, and I don't think there was a vote either.
No, there wasn't.
Indians were given the vote, afforded the vote in Canadian Parliament since 1960, but it's interesting when you ask about that, because it's always been that the Indian nations and the Crown have had a special relationship because the Indians own the land. And in the Supreme Court of Canada case, there was recognition of the fact that it's always been so that the Indian nations are the rightful owners of the lands which they traditionally occupy. It's got about it an element of sovereignty recognized.
Go ahead and try again from Port McNeill.
Yeah, that's me.
Right.
Jack, first of all, I want to say is you make me happy, you make me sad, but best of all, you make me think.
Good.
I want to ask these people here, I went with an Indian girl for a year and a half, and what I have to ask is, when you get all this stuff together, what are you going to do with the drunken Indians? That's my question.
That's not a fair question, but
it's
because I worked with drunken Indians before, and why should I have to pull their weight and mine at the same
okay,
time?
we'll leave the question on the table. I've worked with drunken non-Indians.
It's a common problem. It's symptomatic of there are other situations. There are reasons why our people are in that situation. We think we can solve those problems and eliminate.
You think you can do a better job than our system does?
I think we can.
Almost anybody could. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Just one question to your two guests there, please. The way they're talking about Aboriginal rights, etc., the Indian land claims, etc., eventually all us who are white trash will have to be we'll have to get on the boats and go back where our ancestors originally come from.
We can go on Indian welfare. That's a joke, by the way.
You know, you shouldn't look at yourself as trash. You know, if you listen closely to what I've said, we see that the non-Indian people who live in our territory are experiencing similar problems. They don't have the extremes of unemployment that we have, but they are much higher. Like they're 30%. Of the people in our territory are unemployed. That's the non-Indians. We see that they have problems and that they need solutions in the future, and all of society does. We think that this is a model and can lead to solving those problems for all people in our territory. We're not just looking at our own people.
Can I make an observation?
Sure.
I can see, and you know, legally and all the rest of it, perhaps it's your land, 21,000 square miles. And perhaps like the James Bay Indians, you should get a few $1 billion. But I can't see another level of government dividing British Columbia into two systems of administration, education, welfare, highways, roads, and everything else. That's what I cannot see. It doesn't seem to me to be practical or acceptable.
Jack, let me just refer to the regional district concept in British Columbia. It's a good idea, but it's not strong enough. If you can appreciate that I'm talking about something better than the regional districts, that on recognition of title and jurisdiction, that we start to negotiate that it is not something foreign or alien or separate from...
it's certainly overlapping.
It has to overlap.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning. I would like to address the question of Aboriginal rights. How are Aboriginal rights established? Is it just because you've been here longer? It's certainly been established in my mind that the Indians didn't have their own parallel evolution here and develop or pop out of a rock here in BC or whatever. So are we saying that just because they've been here longer? My family's been here in Canada for something like 11 or 12 generations. Do I have more rights than Mr. Webster, for instance? I don't want more rights than Mr. Webster, but I would really like to know what your claim is based on. Because I know that the Indian people ultimately came from somewhere else, so it's just a matter of them being here longer. What is the basis of this Aboriginal rights? I'd like to know.
Well, I think that you make a mistake by saying that we were simply here. We were here in organized societies. We have our languages and our traditions. We also, for example, Jack lives on Salt Spring Island, I believe, and he pays his taxes every year, and he bought the property, and he's practiced, his ownership is through the system that your government recognizes. We have a similar system. It's through an oral tradition. It's gone on for centuries. We came into, one of the ways that we obtained our land was entering land that was not occupied. We conquered land, and we have our histories. We own the land. We have been here for centuries. We don't say we came from some other country. What you have in common with Jack is that you came here within the last, at least in British Columbia, within the last 150 years to North America within the last 300 or 400. And the countries that you came from said, we have to sit down and sign treaties with those people who already live there. That's what the Royal Proclamation said. It was signed in 1763.
Does that apply to BC?
It does apply to British Columbia. It's part of the Constitution of Canada.
I can understand the treaties on the Iroquois and the eastern ones where they made specific treaties at specific time to come, and on the prairies too, did they not? Yeah. We had no formal treaties here in British Columbia.
But we should have. We should have. There's some treaties on the island, there's some treaties in northeast British Columbia. They didn't finish the job.
Tell me, did the Indians, you say the Indians, they went into land that was unoccupied and they also went in and conquered lands?
That was when, in relation to our own people, other Indian groups.
These other Indian groups that were conquered, were they extended to Aboriginal rights?
No.
I rest my case.
I wonder if I could just say something.
That's a good point. When you killed somebody on the beach in Cowichan, not you. When some occupying group was killed somewhere, the others took it over.
That's right.
Yes, but I want to say something,
So if we'd killed all the Indians, there'd be no argument today.
That might be true, Jack.
But we didn't. And the country was founded upon the principle which was enunciated in the Royal Proclamation, and that's land is acquired by consent. There's never been a treaty in British Columbia, and there's no other way to acquire somebody's territory or their sovereignty except by their consent. The province of British Columbia has just come in and taken the land.
Fine. The one enjoyable thing for me in this program this morning, one of the enjoyable things, is that I'm sure Louise and Neil Sterritt are right. Bennett has got a problem which you'll have to face when the list pendants goes on that 21,000 square miles. It'll be nice to see him maybe make up his mind about something sometime. My thanks to Neil Sterritt, the Gitxsan Carrier Tribal Council, and to Louise Mandell. This won't be the last program you hear on this subject, because this is the biggest land claim yet, right?
Right.
I'll be back with the guy who drives a car. I forget his name. He drove out here this morning anyway. I hope he didn't have an accident. Tommy Holmes of ICBC. After the break.